Hey, and welcome to my blog on being a superwoman or having what I call Superwoman Syndrome. Okay, let's break down what Superwoman Syndrome is all about. I used to be Superwoman. I no longer try to wear that cape, and I'll tell you why and what happened through my own personal story of burnout by, trying to do it all and have it all. But first I want to talk about the word busy, and it's something that Susie Lefanu and I have a little bit of a chat about in the interview with her. If you haven't listened to that yet, it's the first blog in the Balance series, and she talks about how she noticed in a clinic, she has 3 clinics, she works with a lot of women day in, day out, and she's noticed this theme of where we see busy as something that we're really proud of. We kind of see that, the busier we are, the more the more we're progressing, as opposed to, flourishing without having to do so much. And there is this kind of mentality amongst women that it has to be hard to kind of get what we want. And I think for me personally, it came from, my mother always saying to me, she used to say to me a lot when I was a small child, you can have it all, you can have the career, you can have the babies, you can travel the world. And for me, it kind of set up like this, wow, I can have it all. But for me, I always thought that had to be hard. I had to work really hard if I wanted to have it all. And that was a real misbelief and misconception that has led me to burning out more times than I'd like in my life. Balance has been, and flow has been an ongoing work in progress for me. I've always had to check myself. And I really, I noticed the other day when I was having a conversation with one of my best friends on the phone, this kind of addiction that we have to busy. 14 times I was sitting counting as she was talking on the phone how many times, she said the word busy. And I was like, wow, and again, saying it with pride. And it's not necessarily something that we want to be proud of. There's nothing wrong with being active, but like anything, if it's excessive, if what we're trying to fit into a day is literally getting us to a point where we're falling over, then it's excessive and it's no longer helpful. So there's nothing wrong with being busy, as long as we're not wearing that Superwoman cape. So let's break down, my Superwoman story. For 8 years, I ran a mental health retreat. I started that retreat from scratch. And by scratch, I mean scratch. I taught myself everything that I needed to launch that business. And I was really proud of this. I was proud that I could do the marketing, I could build the website, I could answer the phones, I could do the sales, I could do the quotes, I could do all of the facilitation with the clients, I could teach them yoga, I could run them, I could do the accounts, I could manage the team. I started that business when my little girl was born. I started that literally a couple of months after she was born, not thinking that it would be successful, and it really was quite successful. And because I had this vision that I really wanted to help people, it was all coming from the right place. But I literally wore all the hats, and it just got to a point where it was ridiculous. Once I started coaching, I could then be the coach. So it was like, wow, I really am a one-stop shop now. The problem with doing that in business is that business ends up becoming not viable, because to fill those shoes, and you have to think about this in your own life, if you had to get somebody to take over your roles, how many people would it take to fill those roles? And I didn't realize this until I tried to extract myself from that business. And just to cover my actual on-the-ground work with the clients, I needed 3 people just to cover that. Accounts and marketing, I needed another 2 people. Like, I started to realize that actually if I was to hire people to do what I was doing, that I probably needed about 6 people. So the whole business was actually not viable. No one would ever buy a business. No one would ever work that way. And I think especially if you have your own business, we kind of fall into this trap. But I know a lot of women that work for other, for companies as well, that are literally killing themselves for this company. And they're like, they get a lot of praise, rewards, and even bonuses from their boss. And I'm like, of course you do, because you're actually saving them 2 other salaries with the way that you work. So fast forwarding this, obviously I fell over at some point, and it had a catastrophic effect, probably mostly of doing that on my relationships. And I certainly had some issues with control. I didn't want to let go of some roles because, of course, I could do it better than anybody else could. So for all you perfectionists out there that think that no one else can do your job, they actually can. And sometimes we need to stop. And I talk about this in the written version of the blog, is that we actually need to stop, because if you don't, something will stop you. And pull back and think about, okay, if I had to fill all the hats and shoes that I'm wearing, like, how many people would it take to do that? What I do at home as well as what I do, out in the world. So this kind of addiction that we have to being busy, and I can say I did actually get a lot of praise. So there's something in modern society now where we really praise women for doing this. It's like, wow, people used to say to me, wow, you're Superwoman, and they would say it, not sarcastically. They would literally come with a hug, you're so amazing, look at, and I remember at that point thinking, this is not okay. There's something very wrong. If I look superhuman with what I'm pulling off in a day, that's, there's something very wrong with that. And it was at that point that I really started to pull up and go, okay, look, I need to stop. And it turns out, without notice, the universe kind of had my back in some way. And that stopping didn't come by choice. And I ended up losing pretty much everything. And this is the thing about burnout, is that you're no good to anybody when you get to the point where you fall down. So we really have to be smarter and, really think about doing things and in a way that doesn't involve killing ourselves. So I was definitely running with this belief that it had to be hard. I had to do it all myself. As opposed to having self-reflection time to be able to actually pull back and make self-reflection a part of my life. And as I went through that little burnout stage post, the end of my retreats, I actually I worked with quite a few different coaches and mentors, from business to life coaches to energy workers, a lot of different advice and help. And that's something that I really think is important, like this, having a mirror in front of you, mentors, guides, someone who can actually sit in front of you and call you on your stuff, and then taking responsibility for it. So taking the time to reflect and pull back and actually look at what you're doing, and recognize that you're not a robot, and look ahead and go, okay, where is this actually leading and taking me? Is it going to, is this workable over the long term? Is what you're doing right now? Because another thing that I hear a lot of women say is it's just for now, and then it's going to change, and it never does, because you're not actually reflecting and planning for it to change. So when you have this self-reflection time, something that's really important is to actually hear yourself. Because if I was honest with myself during that time, I wasn't happy with what I was doing, and I would whinge about it a lot to my partner. I want things to change. I want things to be like this, but I wouldn't actually take action on it. I wasn't really listening to myself. So when you have this self-reflection time, it's about getting clear on your worth. I am worthy, and that's the second thing that I wanted to cover. I am worthy of having it all. It just might not need to look the way I thought it did. It might not need to be so hard, and I might need to trust in others, ask for help, look for support, and I might need to trust in something greater than myself, that if I kind of pull back and reflect, and I think of different ways of doing this, and it might involve some compromise and change and letting go of control, letting go of what we think we have control over. And if something, if something positive came out of that whole experience with me, it was that I learned that I was worthy of having not just everything that I wanted externally, but also the happiness internally. And that meant having to trust, that it didn't have to be so hard. be smart with your solution. So if you have this wording where you're like, I can't stop because, or people would say to me, well, how about you work it this way? And how about you work it that way? And I would say, it can't happen because of but. So I had this really limited, kind of ability to be smart about my solutions because I was so tired. I just didn't have the energy to think about it. And this is the thing about being the creative force in your own life, is that you can't be a creative force and you can't have smart solutions if you're tired and fatigued. Okay, it just feels like too much to think about, making any kind of change, which is why this me time and self-reflection time becomes so important, because it is the actual base for which our creativity is going to come from, so that we can actually find different ways of doing things that don't involve us putting on this cape and looking like this amazing woman who's about to just literally fall over, or literally falls over at the end of the day. So I'm sure all of you know someone who has Superwoman Syndrome. And the base of this definitely comes down to this need that we have to control everything. And, this vision that we have set up in our minds that we have to get to this point and then we'll be happy, because we'll have it all. And these are dangerous, there's a certain level of perfectionism that comes in as well. And they're dangerous beliefs if it's affecting our health and our happiness. So if you know someone, feel free to share this email with them, or this blog. And I'd love to hear your comments. I'd love to hear, whether you feel that this is you and that you feel stuck and if there's no way out. So drop your comments in below, because it's really helpful for me. I can give you some advice, and the other women can also chip in with their advice that are commenting. So I hope you enjoyed and have a great day.